We good? Okay, guys, it's about 2:02, so we're going to get going here. A very important briefing discussing an overview of implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future. And at the witness table, we've got my friend and my former county executive for Montgomery County, Ike Leggett, the chair of the Accountability and Implementation Board, and we've got Ms. Rachel Heiss, the executive director of the Accountability and Implementation Board. And so I see we've got a PowerPoint. Ike, did you want to lead off, or is Rachel? Okay, so it's all yours.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in today. Very much
thank you.
appreciated.
Let me first of all congratulate you on this new position and all of those who are serving on this committee. When I looked at its scope, I said, this is a committee of almost everything. You know, pretty broad, pretty extensive. Let me also thank you for your wisdom, leadership, and commitment to public education in the state of Maryland. The fact that you provided a framework for the blueprint, the resources outlined, says an awful lot about the leadership here, an awful lot about your commitment to our state. It is impossible to overestimate the challenges that we face and the need for reform. Let me start off by also indicating that I was not part of the initial current commission, the processes that led us to this point, and that's both good and bad. I kept somewhat abreast of what was happening throughout that process, but I was not directly involved. So I come with a perspective of some new ideas, a new look and approaches, but with the approach that what I'm here for is to provide the leadership to ensure that we implement the plan and implement it with fidelity within the time frames that have been outlined. As we looked at it and we've evaluated, one of the key questions that developed is, why do we have this? Why was there a need for this? But first, let's start back on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And we're trying to accomplish something to provide Maryland with a first-class, world-class educational system. I was misled early in my career about our performance. As county executive, Montgomery County, we had a fairly good competitive system in the state. But as I looked at it over the years, not only in Montgomery County, but throughout the entire state of Maryland, we have fallen behind. And we need to look at where our performance was at that particular point in time. And if you look at that, you'll see that probably just over a third of our students were not college or career ready. You'll see that over 50% of our students came out of school and needed remediation into the college work. You'll see that we lost probably 50% of our teachers within the first 5 years. And the challenges and the problems continue to multiply. When you look at the United States, we are somewhat in the middle of the pack in terms of the world. And Maryland is in the middle of the pack of the United States. The United States is in the middle of the pack. We're in the middle of the pack of the United States. It's equivalent to saying that the world is playing Major League Baseball, and we're in the middle of the pack of the AAA League. That is not sufficient for a state with the resources, the state with the ability, I think, to improve that. And for us to ensure that our state's economy, the quality of life continues to rise at the level that we want, we have to change that. You recognize that. You decided to do something about it. And this was not a quick thought process. When you look at the time frame that you spent in order to push us to this point, it was about a 4.5 year process, starting in 2016 up until today. So it wasn't a quick thought, a quick knee-jerk reaction. It was a thoughtful process to provide this state with a roadmap, a blueprint for where we should go. And where we want to go is to provide us, the state of Maryland, to ensure that all students leave high school career or college ready. It's all students, regardless of where they come from, disability, ethnicities, you name it. All students in the state of Maryland treated to a world-class education. It'll take us a while to get there. The plan is a 10-year plan, and so I'm going to go through just a couple of steps because there may be some people who are newer on the committee and probably did not get the first iteration of this. We intend to accomplish this through a series of pillars, 5 separate pillars. The pillars are interrelated, and you need to look at them in tandem. But there are 5 separate pillars. The first pillar is to ensure that students enter kindergarten, or students are ready to learn, the early childhood education. And when you think about where our students are, a good portion of those, probably only about a third of those are ready to learn in kindergarten. And so the focus of the first pillar is to address early childhood education. The second pillar addresses something that is fundamental for us, that is to expand the quality and the diversity of teachers within our system, to ensure that we have high-quality teachers, to ensure that we have a more diverse array of teachers throughout the state of Maryland. Because there's a fundamental belief that we need more teachers, high quality of teachers, and more diverse teachers. That's essentially what we are trying to do. And there are a number of steps and measures that we've outlined to accomplish that. Certainly providing increased pay, ensuring that there's a career ladder, ensuring that teachers have more collaborative time, ensure that we have the proper leadership. All of those things are embedded in this plan, and I hope that you have a copy of this. If not, we will make sure that you have one. This is the plan that we've initially put out. And the third pillar is college and career readiness. You heard the governor earlier today talk about career readiness and ensuring that there's a path for a number of our students, of all students. But the challenge for us is to have standards of having career readiness that is at a world-class level, with apprenticeships, internships, and a direct path to that. But the students have to be prepared in order to take advantage of those pathways. That's the challenge for us. The objective is to have all of our students by the end of the 10th grade, for assessment of their career readiness. That's what we're shooting for, that they are career and college ready at that point in time. And either if you decided it's the college you want to go to, you can start with advanced placement. If you are interested in a career and that's the path, there will be quality programs for you to pursue that. The fourth path, of course, is that all of this does not operate in a vacuum. Many of our students come from very difficult environments. They need support, they need assistance, and there's an entire pillar directed to how do we better address those needs of our students who are coming in places where they need additional support. And the fifth pillar is governance and accountability. You provided a great deal of money. This is a 10-year plan. And we can't wait to the end of the 10th year, given the resources that you provided and the importance of this, to assess whether or not we're on the path to making this right. You'll find that there are constant assessment, there are constant working relationships that we'll have. We'll be looking at this in a fully integrated way of all of these pillars and the things, objectives that they're provided to do in working in partnership with all of the entities that would help us, so that we'll have a good assessment as we go forward on whether or not we're meeting the objectives. Now, as I indicated before, part of what we've tried to do in developing this plan is to make sure that we've worked in partnership with our partners, the State Board of Education and others. You'll find, I think, around page 9, just how exhaustive we've been in terms of transparency and outreach. That provides us with the number of entities and the number of organizations that we've worked with in 2022. And I would say, to our credit, and especially to the person right next to me, Rachel and her staff, we started late with inadequate staff, but we have met the objectives of putting the initial plan together. This is a comprehensive, well-documented plan designed to achieve the objectives that we have. And we did this with lack of staff, all the support we needed, and the challenges of COVID and everything else. And you see just some of the steps we had just in providing this plan. The number of meetings, the number of contacts we've had have been exhaustive. It's a huge array of contacts, so that when you hear and talk to others engaged in this process, please keep in mind, this has been very transparent, very involved, with hearings and a number of other things as well. Let me close at this point with just a couple more observations. This plan, the blueprint, is not an easy plan to accomplish. This will be hard. We're not looking to simply dot the i's and cross the t's for what we are currently doing. This is not this plan. When you adopted this, you sought major changes and reform. And so to achieve this, two things that I've noted clearly about this. It is a cultural transformation. People essentially want to do the same things that they've been doing, but making minor adjustments. That's not this plan. That's not this plan. And so when you are confronted with this, it's equivalent to some people being shocked like a deer in the headlights. They agree to the objectives. They think this is wonderful to do. And intellectually, they accept that. But when confronted with the reality of what this General Assembly asks for and what we've laid out in terms of what you have to accomplish, it is a tough task. It's a tough task. The second challenge is that the blueprint was adopted essentially prior to, most of it, prior to the start of the pandemic. And subsequent to the pandemic, as you know, some things have changed. One is very obvious, and the governor talked about it earlier today. The number of teachers, the impact of teachers, have forced an awful lot to leave the career. So we have a plan that calls for more teachers, more diversity of teachers at a time when the numbers are going down. And so that's a real challenge for us. So if you ask me what are the two major challenges, the first one for me would be the cultural transformation here. We're doing things differently. And we cannot do all of the things that are outlined in the plan unless we address the teacher shortages and the challenges with the quality and the diversity of teachers. It just simply will not get there. But I'm optimistic, given the tools that we have to work with and the commitment from so many people around the state, that we can get there. But it would not be easily done overnight, and there will be challenges along the way. Now, what we did not do was to make any major deviations from the plan as originally presented to us. There may be, and I think there may be a couple of technical changes here and there, but the board did not pursue starting the plan or changing the plan before we've gotten fully addressed in implementing the plan. Our approach is that we are moving toward implementation. We move forward to get the initial plan out. We're working with our partners, but we recognize that we may have to come back and to make some adjustments. But we're not going to start off making the adjustments before we start. Otherwise, we'll never get started. So, Rachel, you may want to say a couple of points before we stop, but I think that it will address questions or things that I may have. This is the wonderful Rachel Heiss, who was so instrumental and with a small staff of putting this together in such a relatively short period of time. Rachel?
Sure. Thank you, and it's really a pleasure to be back with all of you. It's a little odd to be not on the legislative side of the work anymore, but it's been a tremendous honor to take on this role and a challenge. It's been a very challenging year, but very proud of the work that we've done so far, and it's really just the beginning. We're kind of at the end of the beginning, yeah. So I just real briefly wanted to just touch on a couple of other things besides the comprehensive plan that the AIB has been focused on in the past year. A big accomplishment was appointing 4 advisory committees with members from around the state. And this was, reflecting the concern that the board itself, and only having 7 members, in any case, was never going to be able to represent the entire state or all the various stakeholders. And so these 4 advisory committees, each focused on one of the 4 sort of content pillars, were appointed in July, and they have been meeting. They've met several times, at least 3 times, I think, each of them in the fall, and they provided feedback to the AIB specifically on the draft comprehensive plan. As we were going through the comprehensive plan development process, there were a number of iterations of the plan and public sessions held where the public could actually participate in the meetings and provide comments and ask questions. And the advisory committees also provided that same type of input on the plan itself. And they are going to be meeting at least quarterly. And the meetings are, all of the AIB's meetings and all of the advisory committee meetings are live streamed and public, and also archived on the AIB's website, which at the end here I have a link to that. The chair pointed out all the various outreach we've been doing throughout the year to the various local school systems, boards of education, counties, advocacy organizations, philanthropic organizations, and of course had many, many meetings. And I don't know if you want to say anything about the joint board meeting with the State Board of Education?
Yeah, we also met with the State Board of Education in a workshop about a month or 2 ago, and we've had very good collaboration with the State Board and other entities as well. Clearly, we cannot do this work alone. We need their help and support because they're the ones who are on the ground doing a lot of the day-to-day legwork of things that need to be done, as well as some of the other institutions around the state. There's one area that I failed to mention, and that is we are still working on the matrix, and we did not want to rush in that aspect, and I think we have a report to have that ready in a couple of months. But what I mean by that, the matrix, is the challenge in sort of a lay term, is that around the state, people are not clear about where they start. There's different terminology about where each system currently, the foundation exists. How do we determine what is success? We know what the ultimate success is, that everybody should be career college ready by the end of the 10th grade. But how do you measure and what do you consider success on an ongoing periodic basis? And where do we start to start that measurement? The way I look at it, if you're in a sporting event of a football game, are we all starting at the 5-yard line, the 20-yard line, or the goal line? And if we make a 5-yard increase every year, do we consider that successful? Is it 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards? So we need to work that through to make sure that everyone is clear about where we start, how we measure success, and whether or not we're getting to that ultimate goal. Because how we determine that would be a clear reflection upon each and all local boards throughout the state. And they do not want to be misjudged by saying, the rate of increase is too significant for us to say that is success, because that's too much in 1 year. Or we started at a different location, and we're not all starting at the same location together. So I think you want to talk a little bit about where we are with that committee and so forth, Rachel.
Sure. So what the chair is referring to, the Outcome Measures Working Group, which is on the slide here in the middle there. And that is a group that the AIB is appointing. Folks nominated themselves or nominated others to serve on this group. And it's going to be really taking a deep dive into what the baseline data is for each of the pillars, and what measures we are going to use to assess progress in implementing the blueprint. And the comprehensive plan, the initial plan, has a series of outcome measures.
I was trying to wait. I just had some visitors, so they were getting ready to leave, and I just
Oh.
wanted to tell them not to leave.
I'm so
until
sorry.
No, it's not you. I was trying to tell them to hold it. Could I introduce them?
We're just about through, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah,
Your guest?
that's all I wanted to do.
Sorry, County Executive, if you wouldn't mind, Senator Washington, please go ahead. Recognize your guest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Leggett, actually, this is great timing. It's important for us to always remember why we're doing this. I have two sets of guests that are right here observing this. They're the young people from the Tunbridge Charter School, elementary, middle school in Baltimore City. So if you all stand up. They wanted to come. They came by to visit today. Today is Charter School Day. Charter schools are public schools, and so I'm honored to have Tunbridge to be one of our schools. And then also I have the head of the school for Baltimore Collegiate for boys. And so, again, just thank you. Colleagues, if you would just greet them, maybe give them a hand for coming down, expressing an interest in our system, and letting you know that we're doing all of this work, Chair Leggett, for them, of course. So, thank you.
Congratulations, thank you.
Wonderful. Future teachers, hopefully.
Thank you, Senator Washington, and thank you, students, for being with us, and thank you, sir, for your leadership. We're going to go back to the presentation. Because I was a couple minutes late, I assume that our chair, Senator Feldman, appropriately recognized and bragged about the two of you on this committee. But for those of you who have not been here for a long time, or anyone watching at home, you have to know that Ike Leggett was Montgomery County's extraordinary county executive for 3 terms, and that Rachel Heiss is a nationally known and respected leader on education policy. And she was like the key go-to person when I served on the Appropriations Committee in the House in the 1990s. And so I'm not going to ask her how many years in total she was with us, but we are blessed to have her expertise and her leadership as well. So, Mr. County Executive,
go ahead.
or Ms. Heiss, please, back to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for telling everyone how old I am. Right, okay. So I was just, the Outcome Measures Working Group. So this is the group that is going to be appointed very soon, and we'll start meeting over the next 6 months or so to really build out the outcome measures that are listed in the plan, define and identify the metrics that we're going to use to measure progress, and then look at the actual data. Set the baseline data, set the goal for whatever year it is, and then identify targets or milestones that are the expectations of progress at a statewide level over the next 10 years. And then that right there is a huge undertaking. And all of that is to be incorporated into, so this was the initial plan. In August of this year, there will be an updated plan that will incorporate the results of the Outcome Measures Working Group, as well as then, of course, the AIB will review, and we're going to go through the same very public, transparent process that we did in developing the initial plan, in developing the updated plan. So there will be many, many opportunities for public input and feedback from stakeholders and from the public before the outcome measures are adopted. We will get as far as we can get in terms of LEA level targets, but I think realistically, I think if the working group can recommend a methodology or a framework by which the LEAs would then start looking at their baselines for each of the measures and what the state goal is, and start to develop targets that would then come back to the AIB and MSDE as well for review, and the AIB for approval. So that's a lot of work still to be done. And then the other, the upcoming activity is that all of your local school systems are, I'm going to say frantically, working to put together their blueprint implementation plans. Those are due March 15th. And they will be submitted to the AIB and to MSDE simultaneously. And just as a reminder, MSDE will be reviewing the plans and making recommendations to the AIB about whether the plan should be adopted or not. And the AIB will also be reviewing the plans and sort of coming to their own determination. And the goal is to complete that process by June of this year. And there is some money on the table as part of this process, just to be very clear. Under the blueprint, 25% of the new funding is automatically withheld from each LEA and released when the plan is approved. That process will apply for fiscal '24, so not the current fiscal year, but the budget that you're considering for next fiscal year. For this fiscal year, the funding will be released if the LEAs and their plans meet the minimum guidelines that the AIB has set for the plans, which, is essentially, there's a 99-page limit, which surprisingly, they would like it to be bigger. They would like more, to be able to provide more, but there's a 99-page limit. That was a requirement in the law that the AIB set a page limit, and that each of the questions are responded to fully. And so that is what will guide the release of those funds in the current fiscal year. And then we're also in the process of providing, with MSDE, technical assistance to the LEAs as they're working on developing their plans. And the AIB is also providing technical assistance to the other state entities that will need to submit plans by March 15th. That includes MSDE, the new Career and Technical Education Committee, called the CTE Committee, and also the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports will be submitting a plan on March 15th. And then we're also gearing up to recruit for the remaining positions with the AIB. The chair mentioned that it's a very small staff right now, as we have been working to develop hiring process and procedures and staffing plan to move as the AIB kind of fully starts up. It's been starting up a state agency, I'm going to just say, is not for the faint of heart. It is very challenging, but I think we're finally getting into our groove and able to start to really do some real big recruitment, and also push out some funding and technical assistance for the LEAs very soon. And the last slide, just want to share this. So the website was one of our big early accomplishments. We really, and that also was challenging, but we wanted a place where, the public and stakeholders, everyone could go and find all the information related to the blueprint. And so I encourage you to go to the website, and all of the advisory committee members are listed there. All of the reports that have been submitted to the AIB are posted there. And the plan is also there, as well as all of the supporting materials that go along with the plan, because there are some other documents. And so I think you all probably know how to do this, but just in case, if you aim your phone camera at the QR code, that will connect you to the website. And I think that's
Yeah.
it.
That's it, Madam Chair.
Chair Feldman has a hearing in another committee, and I have a hearing coming up, but for the time being, we're going to do that. Senator Crozo, will you pause just a moment? Could I go first? Okay, thank you. Just briefly. First off, I misspoke. My wonderful county executive didn't serve for 3 terms. He served for 4 terms. So 16 years is a long darn time, and I don't want to shortcut that. Second, Rachel, primarily, the March 15th process, the LEA, the local education associations, our county school boards and stuff, submit their draft testimony, their draft blueprints. Could you just talk us through what happens to it? I assume they're not all, rubber stamped as perfect. I assume it's a back and forth process, so if you could speak to that.
Sure.
And then a second question is, I followed along a little bit because the diversity, the language diversity of my district with the English language learner, the foreign language component of this. So could you speak to that? Because I know we're getting legislation on it. But I've also heard from folks who have been disappointed or frustrated that access for families, for parents or guardians of students with disabilities have not been as fully heard or included in this process. So I wonder if you could speak to both of those. So I know that's 3
Sure.
different questions.
Sure.
Are you good?
I think, yes, I'll try.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel.
So in terms of the blueprint implementation plan, so each LEA will submit by March 15th their local plan. And we have a process, we're working jointly with MSDE on this. So they will upload their plan and a lot of other supporting documents to make it available to the AIB and MSDE staff to review the plans. The plans will also be posted on the AIB website. So we will be posting what you call the draft plans, the plans as submitted, we will be posting those. And then there is, as part of the developing the plan, we also worked with MSDE on a set of criteria for success, which are the criteria that the AIB and MSDE have jointly agreed to use in evaluating the LEA plans and whether they are approvable. So there will be reviewers within MSDE, and I believe that the superintendent is planning to also hire some third-party reviewers to review the plans, and then AIB will also be reviewing the plans. And we will each do our review, and then we're going to come together and share our comments. And there will be a process where we would then potentially go back to the LEAs and ask them to revise, raise questions or concerns. They'll have a time period to submit revisions, and then ultimately there will be, a process where MSDE will, formally make a recommendation to the AIB that the plan it should be approved or not approved, and then that will come to the AIB, and the AIB will then make a decision.
Let me add on the question of, especially in Montgomery County, where we have a large number of students with different languages. Here's the expected outcomes. And so no matter how we look at this is how we're to be judged. It says, improve the quality and equity of Maryland's educational system so that all Maryland students, regardless of where they live, household income, ethnicity, gender, language spoken at home, disability, any and all unique characteristics, can leave high school globally competitive and prepared for success in post-secondary education, work, and life. And so This is our mission. And so we are not successful unless we've achieved these things at the numbers and rates that we're talking about. All of the proceedings that we have been open. We've talked about it. There may be some uneasiness here or there because due to other factors, it may appear that one thing is emphasized more than the other. And this information, in terms of how we evaluate this, will be disaggregated so that you would not have people with different challenges mixed into the mix to which you cannot identify that. So if we have not addressed disabilities, we have not addressed language, then we have not achieved. And so that's the measure to which we have been held to.
Specifically, there was an English language work group that was part of the blueprint, and Superintendent Chaudhary chaired that work group for 2 years. They actually submitted their final report a month early at the AIB's request so that we could incorporate their recommendations into the plan. So all of the recommendations of the work group that could be incorporated into the plan are in the plan. And I know there potentially is other legislation related to that, but there are some very high expectations in the plan for what MSDE and the LEAs will do to support English learners. And along the same lines, to your question about students with disabilities, given the concerns there, the AIB included in the plan that MSDE should convene a similar work group focused on students with disabilities. And so that is part of the plan. Sorry. So right now, it's part of the plan. It has not been appointed yet. MSDE is going to include in their plan that they have to submit to the AIB for approval March 15th. They're going to include their plan to convene and the work group, and what the work group will be doing will be part of their plan.
So two things. First off, can you just, because there are people who may be interested, who might be watching, can you give an idea how many and what capacities, what characteristics, what qualifications you may be looking for this new work group for students with disabilities? And second, I'm really curious why the delay if, English language learning has been working for 2 years. Why the delay on disabilities?
Yes.
Let's go back now. We've never delayed. This is part of the original plan. Those in the community have argued, say, well, we need more attention than what you think we have here. And so in response to that, we provided some additional attention and said, okay, just to be safe, to make sure that we've heard all of your concerns, we are going to now address it separately in these task force. So it was never delayed. It's part of the original plan, and there are things already included in here that addresses that. But just as anything else, you may have people that say, well, I want more. I need to be a little bit more precise about this. And whether we agreed or not, we said we're going to respond to that by providing district task force, just because the other one stepped forward, so it wasn't a delay in any form or fashion.
But I know that there is, some concern that the work group has not been appointed yet. What the MSDE wanted to take some time to think through how they want to set up the work group and what the charge of the work group will be, so we agreed that they would be able to take the time to do that and include how they want to approach it in their plan, which will then be subject to AIB approval. The plan, and this is on page 139 and 140 of the plan if you want to look it up. It is, MSD has to establish a work group to collect student data and review instructional methods provided to students who receive special education services. And it has to be established in fiscal '23. So it has to be established before the end of June. And then the interim report, we used a similar timeline to the English language. We use that as our model. So the interim report is due by December 1st of 2023. In case there's something you all want to act on next session. The final report is due July 1 of '24, which would allow the AIB to incorporate the recommendations into an updated plan. So that's the timeline for it. The members will be jointly identified by AIB and MSDE, and we have not, I will say, we have not delved into, discussed that yet specifically.
Thank you both. That was really helpful. Appreciate it. Senator Cardozo, followed by Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Leggett and Rachel, thank you for all of the effort, especially now that we're into implementation. Just as a way of background before I ask some specific questions, as you know, I was a late appointee to the Kerwin Commission, and my focus primarily from the start and continues to be what I believe is absolutely essential for success, which is given as much local flexibility and local authority to work through these plans, especially now that we're into implementation. And back in November, I know that the Wycomico County Public Schools sent up, I think, a very thoughtful letter to the members of the board, really outlining by pillars where they have, where they have had success, but they also went through and highlighted challenges. And, even, I think, some good suggestions for improvements in the overall process. I also sent a letter to the members of the AIB, Accountability and Implementation Board, trying to summarize some of these issues. Fast forward, last week, we had the Eastern Shore of Maryland Educational Consortium meet, and that is all 9 counties from Cecil to Somerset, the local school superintendents. There were 2 key meetings last week with the superintendents. One was, and I want to credit Delegate Jeff Grice for putting this together, specifically focused on the challenges of Pillar 1, which is the early childhood education, and specifically the lack of private child care providers and what that may mean for the schools, and then further complicated by the fact that there are some of our regs that counter federal regs, and so it really, as you started to untangle, became very clear that the work that is going to have to be done to meet the goals of Pillar 1 are enormous. And when the Eastern Shore delegation on Friday met with the school superintendents of the Eastern Shore, the one major takeaway, and this is what I want to underscore before I get into specifics, is the enormous amount of time that these superintendents and school personnel are spending to implement and to meet this March 15th deadline, to the point that they gave us examples of, going through this work and really how it's, in some cases, pulling them off of some core mission with students. And so I want to at least publicly raise to you and to my colleagues a recognition of what these superintendents and their key teams, and it has been a team approach, are going through. Again, so when they do come forward, especially if you read through the November 22nd letter that Wycomico County sent, again, they kind of go through where they are and then kind of also highlight, here's where we're still having challenges. Some of those areas, and I know, Chair Leggett, I'm hearing you loud and clear about, we want to see where we are before we recommend changes. But I have to tell you, I think all of us here know whenever you pass something as major as the blueprint, we all know that you have to go in order for it to be successful and go in those areas where it either needs to be tweaked or some timelines need to be adjusted. And if you want to comment on any of these specific areas, but there has been suggestions about a phased-in approach for some of these timelines and goals with the blueprint. There have been issues raised about the 75% of the revenue source to be allocated to the individual student and what that may mean, especially with the accounting systems that are not in sync locally with the state. And we did, the issue about the national board certification, the state superintendent actually did show some flexibility that there may be other standards we should use, and there seem to be some openings there. And as we go through this, I already highlighted the whole challenge with childcare and lack of private childcare providers, what that may even mean for school construction. So I know that those are a lot of major issues. I go back to what I sent you on November 23rd. Perhaps there are some updates on some of these issues, but if I can just ask for anything that the AIB can do to either simplify the process for these local education, at the local level, or recognition of how much time it's taking, and maybe there's some easy adjustments that we don't even have to do legislatively that we can make. So if you could comment on any of those areas to see that some of their concerns have been addressed.
All right, let me start off. First of all, thank you for your question and your concern. We did receive your letter. And as you can note from the information, we received an awful lot of letters and comments because this was a very transparent process. So, and we've also met with the superintendents. I've met with them several times now. And we've heard some of their comments directly to me and directly to Rachel, in addition to the letters you've just described. The approach that we've taken is that for those things of which we can make adjustments for within the letter of the law, without actually changing the law at this point in time, we have done, and we're open to that. We've taken a position that if there are some things that even in the law itself that need ultimately to be changed, and you make a full faith, good effort and demonstrate why that should be done, we will consider that as well. There are some things that are clearly not within our purview, some things that need to be addressed with the state board, some things that are embedded in the legislation. And we will continue to work with the superintendents. But what we're trying not to do is to start moving the dates around, start making these major changes. If there's some things that are insufficient, we will recognize the time, the challenges, and difficulties that they had to respond to that. But I think it would be a real difficult task if we, in fact, start to majorly change much of what people have asked us to do that do not go within the purview of change of the law. I mean, that goes with the change of the law itself. That would be a huge, huge mistake. We will work, because as I said before, this is not going to be easy, one, but we cannot be successful unless we have that partnership. So it's not in our interest to see them fail and unable to, in effect, achieve this. So we want to make sure that happens.
Chair Leggett, I guess when you said you've already made some adjustments after hearing the concerns of the local school superintendents, can you give me some examples?
For example, if you're talking about the, which is a huge one, that is not easy, one I thought you went to earlier about the early childhood education and the capital components there too, because we don't have all of the space that are necessary. We recognize that there will be some adjustment that needs to be made sooner than later to adjust to that, because many schools simply do not have that space. I mean, you cannot construct that overnight. And so that's one of the ones which we are looking at in terms of how do we address that for the local needs. You simply cannot have.
No, I appreciate that.
You simply cannot have that space disappear overnight because, it takes time to build that. And we'll try to seek other ways in which to do it. In fact, I've even talked to the state about how can we utilize, for example, the state requires that their capital expenditures go into state capital programs that they lease or own. Well, there may be rec centers in communities that are not the state, they're part of the county or some other entity. Why not change the regulations to allow that amount of money that you would have spent addressing the school itself to be placed at some other location? So there are things that we're looking at, but obviously that's one that we've already come to grips with, saying that's going to be very difficult for us to meet, that capital component what you just described.
And just on that point, the Interagency Commission on School Construction is, we've been working with them. They're going to be, I don't think they've publicly announced this yet, but there will be a work group that is going to be looking at the school construction needs associated with the blueprint. Early childhood and pre-K is a big piece of that, but also the community schools aspect takes more space, teacher collaboration, allowing space for teacher collaboration. There are other aspects of the blueprint besides pre-K, which pre-K is one of the first ones one thinks of with capital impacts. And so that work group is going to, I think, start meeting in the near future to make recommendations on, how to address that within the capital improvement program. Another example, and I know how hard the school superintendents and their teams, the blueprint coordinators, we meet with them at least twice a month, are working on their plans, and they're very dedicated, and it's really, it's been very, not just encouraging, but like kind of, it's just, you have a lot of really dedicated folks in all of your districts who have, want to do what is best for students and to do absolutely everything they can. It's been very inspiring is the word I was looking for. Believe it or not, we scaled back these initial blueprint plans significantly. Significantly, because, so the plans that they are submitting in March are not 10-year plans. They're 3-year
Right.
plans.
Yeah.
And we, early in the fall, it became very clear that it was just, there was no way they could do 10-year plans that quickly. And so we have made, and we determined that we had that flexibility within the law. So we have done what we can to modify and make it more feasible. But it's a real balance because, we're asking school systems to do things differently. And it's hard. If it was easy, we would have already done it. And, pre-K is a good example of something that we have been working on for almost a decade now, to really try to roll out a mixed delivery system. And it's hard. But if we don't try, the result is, and we still will have capital needs for pre-K, but the whole reason that the blueprint called for a mixed delivery of public and private providers was because there was never going to be enough space in public schools for all the pre-K kids. So, we really have to try to bring the best minds, the best thoughts to bear on how can we solve the challenges that we know are out there in every pillar. And the plan, as part of the plan, it lays out what needs to be done, but it also identifies what we called implementation considerations.
Point, and then I'll yield.
Yeah,
Just
one last
on back on this, on having the private childcare providers, the AIB may need to get on the record with our federal partners in order to get some waivers and leeway at the federal level in order to bring in those private sector providers. And that's something, when you start to really pull this apart and you realize, the impediment's not at the state level of what we want to do, it's at the federal level, we have to get a waiver. Because you're right, we don't have enough space in the schools, and we do want to partner with we don't want to put them out of business.
Exactly.
So how we do that together, but I guess my request would be for you to look at that piece and see if AIB and others at the state level need to get on record with the feds to make those changes to make it work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator Lewis Young and then over to Senator Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that overview. My question is going to somewhat parallel that of Senator Carrozza's. Our delegation from Frederick County met with the school board and December, before we came to session. We do it annually. Their biggest concern that they raised was the assessment component. Their response was, if we're responsible for assessment, then you're taking our time away from other activities. And in particular, how can you say you're giving us more time for collaborative activities when you're giving us more responsibility for assessment? So I think it's fair to say that the delegation's response to them was, we get that we ask you to do a lot, but assessment is critical to this investment. I think you addressed it somewhat, that you're going to provide some support to our local jurisdictions. Are you going to communicate to them in the very near future what kind of support you're giving them with some very specific action items as well as timelines?
Well, we have resources to provide the support, but the way we've approached it is that they will come and say, we have a problem doing X or Y, and then we will try to respond to that concern, because it would be impossible for us to uniformly start saying we're going to, unless we identify something that is unique across the entire board, to say we need to do X for everybody. But it will be on a specific need of what they think that they need, unless we have identified something that is fairly common to everybody. So we have the resources, we have the intent to help them, but we need to know from them what it is that you think you need to help with. Is it writing the assessment? Is it finding ways in which to ensure that you have some compliance? What is it that you're having most problem with that may not be the same in some other
I
jurisdiction?
see. And Mr. Chair, may I make just one suggestion?
Sure.
In your conclusion, you said that some of your challenges were that this is a cultural transformation, and that pre-COVID, you didn't anticipate the number of teachers leaving the profession.
At that level?
I would like to submit there's a third challenge
Okay.
that wasn't anticipated pre-COVID, and that is a mental health pandemic, particularly among our school children. And unless we devote the identification and the treatment resources to address that, which we couldn't have anticipated pre-pandemic, the blueprint can't be successful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for your
Senator
question.
Hester.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see you here. Thank you. There's a lot of times when I've asked, I just wish I could ask Rachel this question.
I'm still here.
Thanks, Rachel. So my question is coming from the Howard County Board of Ed. And as they think about expanding their half-day students in pre-K to full day, they're finding that they need more space, which you've talked about, but also more teachers. My understanding is that the way that the formula works is the state pays based on the previous year's enrollment. So in that first year, where you're practically doubling the number of half-day to full-day pre-K students you have, you're still basing the funding formula on last year. There seems to be a gap. Is that accurate?
That is the way that all of the K-12 funding formulas work. They use the most recent actual enrollment count. And so just bear with me for a moment. So for the budget that what the governor has introduced for fiscal '24, the most recent actual enrollment is the current fall. And so the current fall's enrollment is going to provide the basis for next year's funding. It's the most accurate way to calculate the formulas, and that it is done that way not just for the full-day pre-K, but because that's a brand-new formula, but it's done that way for all of the foundation formula and the other targeted formulas for based on free and reduced price meal counts, special education counts, and English learner counts. They all follow that same approach. I do appreciate that, and it can be challenging for lots of districts as enrollment is either going up or going down, And, essentially, the impact of that is felt not in the, it's felt in the next year, not necessarily in the year that you're trying to, that you're allocating resources.
I
So,
think Rachel had some that go down now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So
Absolutely.
it definitely is a challenge. I appreciate that, but it is the way that all of the funding formulas work. Yes.
So in the pre-K expansion grants, is there enough funds to like potentially cover that operating expense? So if you had a very small school, you had like 25 half-day kids in the morning and 25 half-day kids in the afternoon, you might have one teacher or whatever for that. And then you expand it, so you got 50 kids going full day. And so what we're agreeing on is that the state funding formula won't kick in the first year those kids start, 'cause the prior year.
Yeah.
So are we expecting the counties to pay that entire, in the first year, to pay that entire share themselves?
So for converting half-day slots to full-day slots, that is an eligible use of the pre-K expansion grants funds, the separate funds, and that is exactly why we kept that funding source going, was to be able to help the LEAs convert their half-day programs to full-day programs. So absolutely, that it can be used for that.
Let me also add something. If, in some form or fashion, this becomes a serious problem in terms of that lag between enrollment and actual pay, that it adversely affects the quality of teaching, that's the kind of a thing that someone could ask. So we need a supplemental, we need something in order to address this now, because I don't think anyone intended that we will have such a delay where we cannot effectively teach kids with such a huge problem, which we have addressed to the system. So I would think that is something someone could make a very strong case to come to say, hey, we have a difference between the intent and reality of what we face. And that's something I think we can address. Whether or not we can resolve it will depend on what happens here in the General Assembly and with the governor. But it seemed to me, as a board member, that if what you've described is a widespread problem, we can't wait a year or so in order to address that. We need to address it more immediately.
Okay, any final questions for Chair Leggett or Ms. Heiss?
Let me,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me close by doing two things. People have asked me, why did you take this on? I'm supposed to be in retirement, and I thought I was. But for those of you who do not know me, I did serve 4 terms on the county council, but that was not my only job. I served in different capacities as well. Many people associate me with Montgomery County, but I'm not from Montgomery County. I'm really from Louisiana. I was one of 13 kids and grew up in abject poverty. When I say abject poverty, I mean abject poverty. No indoor plumbing, no lighting, 3 rooms, not 3 bedrooms, not 3 bathrooms, 3 rooms. And last year, just about this time, my wife and I were in the Antarctica. And as we finally got to the mainland, people start bringing out flags, popping champagne, balloons, and said, oh, I've now been to all 7 continents. That's what they were saying. And I turned to my wife, almost teary-eyed, and I said, you know what? We've been to all 7 continents. But when I grew up in Louisiana, up until the age of 18 and a half, I'd never traveled more than 40 or 50 miles from that location. Now I've traveled completely around the world several times, all 7 continents. You heard both senators talk about my background. In addition to serving as a county executive, 3 times as a council president, I was the associate dean of Howard University Law School, a White House fellow, president of the National County Executive Association, president of MACO, and the awards and honors and the position goes on and on and on. I have 4 degrees. I graduated from law school at Howard. I graduated the first of my law school class. One of the highest academic averages in law school. How did I get there? It was because of education, despite all of the challenges we've talked about and all of the difficulties I went through as a child. I had caring teachers and people who believed in me to instill in me there was a brighter tomorrow. And so when I look at this and I look at what is happening in our system, for me to stay back in relatively comfort retirement and not try to do something about it, I could not look myself in the mirror. I believe in this. Yes, if I'd have drafted this, I'd probably drafted differently. If I have the opportunity to change it, I probably would have changed it. But this is what you decided that you want, and you did so because there's a need. I came out of retirement because I believe in what we are doing. And I know what happened to me, and we look at the kids behind us and the kids that are out there today, we have an opportunity to do something. And I was not going to simply stand on the sideline and simply complain and not do anything. So that's why I'm here. That's why this is important. And we need to roll our sleeves up and get moving. It's equivalent to what I described to many people about a scenario that I developed in my mind of this person wanting to swim the English Channel. And he practices, he gets a coach, he eats appropriately. There's this 26-mile distance between France and Great Britain. And finally, after a year of trying, he gets in the water and starts to swim of this 26 miles. He gets about 13 miles. And the naysayers say, I don't think you can make it. Why don't you turn around and swim back? He swims at 13 miles back. When you look at what you have done in this state, you've done that. You've had the Thornton Commission, you didn't get across. You've had all kinds of local initiatives, you didn't get across. My task is to get us across. Now, there are those who are supportive. On the other side, before they swim, they say, well, you know what? We need to have everything that is perfect before we get in the water. We need all the money, we need all the interests addressed. We need all of those things done before we ever get in the water to start to swim in the first place. Either way, if you're the proponent, you don't get across. If you're the proponent, you don't get across, you never get in the water. We are now in the water, and we're going to get across. Or you could find Rachel and I swimming in the breach,
In the bottom.
looking for someone to dig us out. And I suggest we get in the water, we make the adjustment, but we're not going to stand on the sideline, and we're not turning back. This is too important.
Thank you, Ike. The journey from Louisiana to the table today has been quite a fascinating one, and so I appreciate you giving the rest of the committee. I mean, I know your story. I thought you didn't include you. At Howard, you taught folks who then became county executives in some of our big states. So,
And mayors.
Big counties, right. In any event, any final questions for either Rachel or Ike? And, okay, seeing none. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. Tomorrow, we'll have a briefing on the Chesapeake Bay restoration issues at 1 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock, we'll have some bills, and then we'll do some voting, and that's really on the agenda. So enjoy the rest of your day, okay?